It started on a quiet Sunday morning. The skies were clear, and the world was at peace. Or at least as much peace as humans ever managed. Cities bustled with life, people went about their daily routines, and somewhere, someone was undoubtedly arguing over something trivial on the internet. Then, the sky cracked open. They came without warning. 10,000 alien warships, blacker than night, blotting out the sun as they descended into Earth's atmosphere. They were massive, some the size of small cities, their sleek designs humming with power far beyond human understanding. At first, there was only silence, then chaos. Satellite feeds went dark, communications scrambled, and power grids flickered under the strain of an unknown force. Panic gripped the world as governments scrambled to respond. The aliens had made no demands, issued no threats. They had simply arrived. And for humanity, that was all the warning they needed. The first shots came from the invaders. Blinding beams of plasma lanced down from the sky, turning entire city blocks into molten craters. Military bases were hit first, airfields, missile silos, naval ports, all targeted with surgical precision. The aliens wanted to cripple humanity before a proper fight could even begin. But Earth wasn't some helpless, primitive world waiting to be conquered. The first counterstrike came from an old missile silo in Montana. An aging ICBM, a relic from the Cold War, was hastily reprogrammed and launched skyward. It wasn't much, just a desperate attempt to hit something, anything. The missile streaked toward the nearest alien ship, only to detonate harmlessly against an invisible energy shield. The world held its breath. Then came the second strike, and the third. Within minutes, every major world power had launched a response. Fighter jets scrambled, warships fired their entire payloads, and missiles filled the sky. Some were intercepted, some detonated too far to do real damage. But a few, just a few, got through. The first alien ship to fall crashed into the Atlantic Ocean, sending a tsunami roaring towards the east coast. The second plummeted into the Sahara, kicking up a dust cloud visible from space. More followed. It wasn't much, not yet, but it was proof. Proof that the invaders weren't invincible. And that was all humanity needed. Because if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was war. The first wave of destruction was devastating, but humanity had learned one crucial fact. The invaders could bleed, and if they could bleed, they could die. Across the planet, military forces reorganized. The world, divided for so long by politics and power struggles, suddenly found itself united by something far more primal: survival. Nations put aside their grudges, leaders abandoned their petty disputes, and for the first time in history, Earth stood as one. In underground bunkers and hidden command centers, scientists and strategists worked around the clock, analyzing every piece of alien technology they could scavenge. The few ships that had crashed were already being torn apart by the brightest minds on the planet. Engineers dissected their propulsion systems, weapons, and shields, desperate for an edge. And an edge they found. The aliens' energy shields, so impervious to conventional missiles, had one fatal flaw: they struggled against kinetic bombardment. The force of a solid object moving at high speeds was something their defenses weren't designed to handle. Their enemies had expected energy weapons, laser fire, and plasma bursts. They had never fought humans before, so humans did what they did best. They adapted. The response was brutal and immediate. Old weapons, once considered outdated, were brought back into service. Railguns, long dismissed as impractical, were hastily mounted onto warships and ground-based platforms. Artillery shells were modified to move faster, hit harder. Even space programs were repurposed. Satellites were turned into makeshift kinetic weapons, guided to fall from orbit with enough speed to punch through an alien warship's hull like a bullet through glass. And when the second wave of the invasion came, the aliens learned the hard way that Earth was not so easily conquered. It started in Asia. A fleet of alien ships descended over Beijing, preparing to unleash another barrage. But before they could fire, a hypersonic missile, moving at speeds far beyond what their shields could handle, slammed into their lead vessel. The explosion was immediate and catastrophic. The ship didn't just fall, it disintegrated, sending debris raining down onto the city below. In the United States, an experimental railgun stationed in Colorado Springs fired its first shot. The projectile, a tungsten rod moving at nearly Mach 15, tore through 3 alien vessels before they could even react. The once invincible warships found themselves vulnerable, their sleek designs useless against brute force. And then came the real horror. The aliens had expected to face soldiers, armies, and organized resistance. They had not expected civilians, ordinary people, turning into a nightmare. Farmers in the countryside fashioned explosives out of fertilizer and gasoline, rigging entire fields with makeshift landmines. In the cities, gangs and militias armed themselves, striking at alien patrols with stolen weapons and sheer human fury. Even children were being taught to fight, to resist, to survive. Earth had become a battlefield where every street, every home, every shadow held death, and the invaders, for the first time, began to hesitate. The invasion was no longer a war, it was an extermination, but not the way the aliens had planned. Earth was supposed to fall in days, maybe hours. Their technology was superior, their firepower unmatched. The humans were supposed to bow, to surrender, to accept their fate. Instead, they had done what no species in the galaxy had ever done before. They had made the invaders afraid. The resistance was everywhere. Cities had turned into war zones, highways into kill corridors. Every bombed-out ruin became a trap, every collapsed building a sniper's nest. The aliens had the firepower to level entire blocks, but it didn't matter. For every human they killed, 10 more took their place. And the worst part? The humans weren't just surviving. They were learning. At first, the aliens adapted their tactics, deploying ground forces in stronger units, using better shields, heavier armor. It worked for a time. But then the humans struck back harder. They modified weapons on the fly, repurposed alien tech into their own. Engineers in makeshift labs created electromagnetic disruptors to disable alien shields. Chemists brewed up corrosive agents that melted through their armor like acid. Soldiers strapped explosives to drones and sent them flying straight into enemy formations. Every battle cost the invaders more than they could afford to lose. And then came the assassinations. No one knew how humans had done it, but high-ranking alien commanders started dying, one by one. Some were shot through the skull from distances that should have been impossible. Others were found slumped over in their command posts, throats slit, their security systems useless against human stealth. Even their own ships weren't safe. Human infiltrators, wearing scavenged alien armor, snuck aboard and sabotaged their reactors. The aliens had never encountered an enemy like this before. Other worlds had fallen, submitting to their rule without resistance. But Earth had turned into a nightmare, and it was only getting worse. Across the globe, humanity's counteroffensive intensified. In South America, rebel forces detonated entire mountainsides, burying alien convoys beneath tons of rock. In Europe, underground networks smuggled alien weapons to resistance fighters, turning occupied cities into death traps. In Africa, nomadic tribes lured alien patrols into deserts, where they perished under relentless ambushes and scorching heat. Even space was no longer safe. Human space agencies, NASA, Roscosmos, CNSA, ESA, all had been working in secret. What few ships they had, what satellites remained functional, had been retrofitted with weapons. The first human-led space ambush took place above the Pacific. A group of astronauts, using a supposedly decommissioned station, waited as an alien warship passed overhead. Then, with precision honed by years of orbital calculations, they detonated their entire station's fuel supply. The explosion, harmless in open space, turned into a deadly cloud of shrapnel moving at hypersonic speeds. The alien ship was torn apart in seconds. That was the turning point. The invaders, once so confident, were now trapped. Retreat meant humiliation. Staying meant death. They had only one choice left. They had to destroy Earth entirely. The invaders made their decision. If they couldn't conquer Earth, they would burn it. High above the planet, alien warships repositioned themselves into an ominous formation. The remaining fleet, though battered and weakened, still possessed weapons capable of ending entire civilizations. And now they were willing to use them. The order came from their supreme commander. If Earth could not be ruled, it would be reduced to ash. Their ships began charging up, massive energy weapons glowing with an eerie, unnatural light. These weren't precision strikes. These weren't surgical attacks meant to cripple defenses. This was extermination. They were going to boil the oceans, crack the continents, turn the sky itself into fire. Humanity had minutes. In an underground bunker deep within the Rocky Mountains, the last remnants of Earth's military command watched in horror. Generals, presidents, prime ministers, all had the same grim expression. There was no time to stop the attack. No missile could reach the ships in time. No aircraft could get close enough. And then, from the darkness, a single voice spoke. "We have one last option." It was a scientist, exhausted and covered in grease from weeks of desperate work. He held up a tablet, a shaky hand hovering over a single command. On the screen was Earth's greatest gamble, Project Ragnarok. It was a plan that had only been theoretical, a final contingency if everything else failed. It involved Earth's most powerful nuclear stockpiles, the last of its functioning orbital weapons, and a desperate, suicidal act that no one had wanted to consider. But now, with extinction on the horizon, there was no choice. With a single nod from the president, the scientist pressed the button. And the sky burned. From hidden silos across the world, hundreds of nuclear missiles launched simultaneously. The aliens had thought humanity's nuclear weapons were useless against their energy shields. And they were, when fired one at a time. But this was different. The missiles weren't aimed at the ships directly. They were aimed at the upper atmosphere, at the space between Earth and its executioners. The first wave of detonations created an artificial electromagnetic pulse so powerful that half the alien fleet's systems flickered and died. Shields failed. Targeting systems collapsed. Suddenly, their unstoppable weapons were nothing more than hunks of metal drifting helplessly above Earth. The second wave was worse. A chain reaction of nuclear explosions erupted in low orbit, sending shockwaves and debris flying in every direction. The aliens, unable to maneuver in time, found their once mighty warships shredded apart by the sheer force of Earth's last stand. Some tried to escape, igniting their engines in desperation. Others attempted to retaliate, but their weapons were dead, their ships blind. And then came the final blow. From hidden launch sites, experimental railguns, cobbled together from scavenged alien technology, fired their last rounds. Massive tungsten rods, moving at unfathomable speeds, tore through what remained of the invaders. One by one, their warships fell, spiraling into the atmosphere like dying stars. Some crashed into the ocean, others into mountains, deserts, and wastelands. The largest of them broke apart mid-air, raining fire and debris upon the very planet they had sought to destroy. When the last alien ship exploded in the night sky, Earth fell silent. The war was over. The invaders had come with 10,000 ships. Almost none had made it back. And humanity? Humanity had survived. In the aftermath of the cosmic battle, Earth lay scarred but alive. The horizon was streaked with the remains of shattered alien metal and the glow of fires that slowly faded into the night. Humanity, battered by loss and pain, began to realize that survival was a bittersweet victory. The very air was thick with smoke and sorrow, and the cities were now a mix of ruins and stubborn hope. Yet in every corner, from the charred remains of once thriving neighborhoods to the quiet fields where nature was beginning its slow reclaim, people gathered. They came together to mourn the fallen, to share the memories of loved ones, and to plan how to rebuild a world that had been nearly wiped out. In small towns and big cities alike, survivors set up makeshift memorials. They held vigils for those lost during the invasion and celebrated the heroes who had fought against impossible odds. Stories of courage were passed down from one generation to the next, each tale a reminder of the extraordinary fight for freedom. There was a deep sense of unity now, a bond forged in the crucible of catastrophe. The old rivalries, the petty squabbles of nations, all seemed insignificant in the face of what had been endured. In this shared struggle, humanity found strength in its diversity and resilience. The scientists and engineers who had once raced against time now turned their attention to understanding what had happened. In labs that were hastily built from salvaged equipment and repurposed technology, teams worked together to piece together alien data. They studied the fragments of the invaders' technology, seeking clues that might prevent another attack in the future. There was a determination to not only rebuild, but to evolve, to ensure that Earth would never again be caught unprepared. The very weapons that had once been used in desperate defense were now re-engineered, repurposed as tools of recovery and progress. In every failed experiment and every small breakthrough, there was a message. Humanity was not defeated. Yet amidst the rebuilding, the scars of the war remained vivid. The physical devastation was matched by a psychological toll. People were haunted by memories of those long nights filled with fear and the deafening roar of destruction. Even as the survivors labored to restore life, questions lingered in their hearts. What had driven the aliens to such ruthless aggression? Was it merely conquest, or was there a deeper, more terrifying rationale behind their attack? These questions haunted the public forums and private conversations alike, stirring debates that sometimes turned into heated arguments. Political leaders, now thrust into roles of rebuilding and reconciling, struggled with their own demons. They had made decisions in the heat of battle that saved lives, but at what cost? The world of diplomacy was transformed. Old treaties were revised and new alliances formed. The need for unity and cooperation became more important than ever, as every nation recognized that the future of Earth depended on shared vigilance and mutual trust. Former enemies now shared the burden of reconstruction, realizing that the enemy of their enemy was indeed their friend. In time, communities began to flourish again. New cities rose from the ruins of the old, designed with resilience in mind. They were built to withstand the unforeseen and to honor the memory of those who had fallen. Memorials dotted the landscape, a monument here, a plaque there, each one telling the story of sacrifice and perseverance. There was a sense of cautious optimism, a belief that even after the darkest night, the dawn would come. As months turned to years, Earth slowly healed. The land, once scorched by nuclear fire and alien debris, began to sprout green again. The oceans, though still troubled by chemical remnants, supported life and hope. And in the hearts of all survivors, the lesson was clear. In unity there is strength, and in the face of overwhelming adversity, humanity's spirit is unbreakable. The final silence that followed the alien invasion was not just an end, but the beginning of a new era, one defined by the scars of the past and the promise of a future where Earth would remain free. The war had been fought on a scale that few could imagine, and the price of victory was steep. But in the quiet moments, when a child laughed or an old man shared a story of resilience, the world found a reason to hope again. The memory of the alien invasion would forever serve as a warning and a guide, a reminder of the cost of freedom and the importance of unity in a universe that was far more mysterious and dangerous than anyone had ever believed. Humanity had not just survived an onslaught of 10,000 alien ships, it had redefined itself. And as Earth turned slowly under a star-lit sky, a new chapter began, one where every heartbeat echoed the fierce determination to never let tyranny rule the skies again.